We are nonpartisan and encourage all to come and ask their questions. I would like to introduce our moderator this morning, Karen Lewis, the secretary of our Lynn County League of Women Voters, and she will be moderating. And I'll pass off the microphone to Karen to explain the format this morning.
All right, good morning, everyone. It is so wonderful to see so many folks here at our second forum of the 2023 legislative session. And since its founding in 1920, the League of Women Voters has been a nonpartisan organization encouraging informed and active participation in government. And through its mission, we are working to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influence public policy through education of the voter. So today's forum is part of our voter education efforts. I'm really happy to have so many legislators with us today. So I would like to introduce our panel this morning. So immediately to my left, also your left, is Senator Donahue, and then we have Senator Taylor. Senator Bennett was not able to join us today due to a death in the family. She sends her apologies. Next up is Senator McClintock. And then next to him we have Representative Art Stade and Tracy Ellert. Representative Ellert, thank you. And Representative Jurdy. Just making sure I have it in order. Representative Cooling, yes, thank you. And Representative Wilson, wonderful. We also did invite Representative Golding and Gerhold, and they are not able to attend. So I just wanted to quickly go over the format. I know we introduced it to you, but it doesn't hurt to say it again. So we have an opening statement for everyone on our panel of 90 seconds. And we have our timers with us today. There they are. Thank you for waving that paddle. So you will see the time countdown, and when that red arrow is held up, we ask that you cede your time to the next group. Your time is up. And then once we have been getting submissions from the audience, submissions of questions have not stopped, so feel free to keep submitting questions throughout the forum today. We have collectors, raise your hand, who will collect questions as they come in. All right, and then each question has 90 seconds to be answered. If you would like to cede your time to another legislator on that topic, feel free to do so. All right, and then we will have closing statements at the end for, again, 90 seconds. And I'm just going to keep track of who starts, and we will go down the rows and make sure everybody has a chance to kick off a question. I think that is kind of the format for this morning. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Senator Donahue to give us her opening statement. Oh, and the microphone.
Good morning. It's great to see so many faces, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for holding this. I am Senator Donahue. I am I'm the ranking member for the Labor Workforce Committee. I'm on education, health and human service budget, as well as health and human services, and skipping something, appropriations. So those are keeping me pretty busy right now, particularly the education and workforce. So we've been working on quite a few bills. You may have heard in the news on education that are bringing up some very contentious ideas. And then in the workforce as well, we have child labor law coming back out to make sure that we can fill those workforce positions with children. I'm actually going to do a subcommittee coming up this week on letting 14-year-olds have driving permissions for up to 50 miles both ways so they can work until 11 o'clock at night. I don't know where to even begin with how disappointing the beginning of this session has been. I hope that we can get to some ideas that we all know that are good for Iowans, making sure we have enough daycare for people to actually go to work, and to make sure people are getting enough money when they go to work so that they can afford that daycare and bills. We would like to see affordable housing. There's lots of things we could be working on, mental health funding, things that would help Iowans versus what we are doing right now. Thank you.
Good morning, State Senator Todd Taylor. Last month I was late, so I decided to come early today. But it's great to see so many people here, and it really does help me feel like the community's in touch and wants to talk to us and vice versa. Appreciate that. I'll just jump in without going to all my committees, which are very important perspectives. I'll just jump in and tell you a couple of things that I've noticed in my many years in the legislature. This year is very, very different. Okay, and the governor is, I just think that she's going to do some subtle things and then some very big things, like this government reorganization bill. She wants to call it alignment. I call it realignment or whatever. It's okay if she uses her power to shrink the number of department heads from 37 to 16 or whatever it is. That's fine. But some of the things inside of this bill are very, very scary if people care about government or if they care about services. And who wants to pay taxes? Nobody wants to pay taxes, but we all get it that taxes equal services, and if that's what people want, that's what we'll give them. So we're going through a series of meetings in this very, very large bill. And the headlines in the paper will be about some aspects of that bill. But the problem is, it's massive and wholesale change of everything that we know in government. On the one hand, she's going to say, hey, this is great, this is what we should do. She's exercising her power that way. Just to give you a preview of one last thing as I reach to a conclusion, is that she's going to change department heads and administrative people to have to look over their shoulder to make a political decision on anything having to do with state government. Thank you.
Let me just say, we're learning the acoustics of this room. We're recording and live streaming. So if you want to be sure to hold the mic closer so that everybody in all of the corners can hear. Thank you.
Charlie McClintock, District 42. I sit on Agriculture, State Government, Veterans Affairs, and I'm on the Justice Subcommittee and I'm the Vice Chair with Labor. I wanted to say, first of all, thank you to the League of Women Voters for inviting me and for being here. It's always a great crowd and a turnout, so it's great to have so many people in one area and to be able to hear information and perspectives and comments from everybody. So thank you so much for inviting me. Always happy to attend. And then the one thing I'll say about this part of the session is you're going to hear all the committees that we sit on, and as we get through the session, we'll run like 1,700 bills a year between the chambers. And it's very difficult, at least for me, everybody can speak for themselves, but once we get busy with committees and subcommittees and meetings and everything that we're doing, it's hard to have eyes on every bill and everything that's going on, especially as we get farther into the session. So if you have particular issues or something like that, just know that I can't track every bill of everything that's going on. And as it passes one chamber, it's still got to get to the other chamber, and then it could bounce back, and then it's still got to get signed and amended and things like that. So we are at a busy time in the session. So I may have to refer to my notes or my colleagues on certain things, but we're definitely doing our best to track everything. And it's always a pleasure to hear everybody and answer your questions. Thank you.
No, sorry. Art, use your own.
Yes. I'm Representative Art State. I represent Northeast Cedar Rapids, Hiawatha, and Robbins. And I serve on the Education Committee, the Economic Growth Committee, where I'm the ranking member, Natural Resources, Local Government, and also the Education Budget Subcommittee. So as Representative or Senator McClintock mentioned, there are 38 bills that have already passed the House, passed the floor, gone to the Senate. There are several hundred more moving right now. So things are just, wow, they're brutal right now in terms of trying to follow everything that's happening as the moving bills and with the amendments and trying to keep track of it. So once again, I may not be able to answer your questions on all of the bills as we're still looking through them, but with what's passed, we certainly can. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters and all of you for being here today. This is an impressive crowd once again. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. State Representative Tracy Eller. I represent part of the west side of Cedar Rapids. I want to thank everyone for being here this morning. As a reminder from last time, I sit this year on agriculture, education, labor, appropriations, and I'm the ranking member for the Education Appropriations Subcommittee. I kind of want to piggyback off my last two colleagues when they say that we're having a bit difficulty tracking some of the bills this session. Our education staffer just sent us an email the other day that said in his 13 years of staffing education, the total number of bills at the end of session was 38. That was the highest number. So far, just in the House this session, we have passed 21 in Ed Committee, 22 if you count the voucher bills. So I, like Senator McClintock, might not be able to answer questions on everything because my world has been education this session. Thank you.
Good morning, I am State Representative Eric Jardy, and I represent House District 74, which is portions of northeast and southeast Cedar Rapids, and a west portion of Marion. I sit on agriculture, ways and means, labor, state government, and am ranking member of the Justice Systems Appropriations. As everybody has said, we have had a lot of pieces of legislation go through, but my focus really is entirely on doing what we need for folks here in House District 74, Lynn County, and the state of Iowa. My focus has been the people over politics, lowering costs for Iowans, protecting reproductive freedom so that every Iowan can make their own health care decisions. And ultimately, as they have said, education's been a really hot topic. My priority has been investing in public education, and I really do look forward to hearing your perspectives and answering your questions. And thank you very much for being here today. I see some folks here that I've seen at the Capitol, and it's nice to see local folks engaging also at the Capitol when you're able.
All right, good morning, everybody. I'm Jeff Cooling out of House District 77, which is most of the southwest side of Cedar Rapids. Thank you to the League for having us and hosting today and putting this on. I appreciate it. It's important to me to get out and meet folks and hear from folks in the area about the issues that are important to them. And thanks for everybody that came and is present here today, and those folks online participating as well. My committees I'm on, I'm ranking member for the Labor Committee in the House. I'm on state government, local government, transportation, and then the Transportation Infrastructure and Budget Subcommittees. So been pretty busy lately as we made it through the first 6 weeks of session in state government, reading my 400 and some odd double-sided pages of the state reorganization bill. So I'm continuing to work my way through that, every line, making notes, and I'll bring up in subcommittee about things that aren't going to be real good for the state, and the consolidation of power that will happen with that bill between the governor and the attorney general. So appreciate any questions. I'll obviously give any insight that I have, and thank you all again for having me and being here.
Hi there, Elizabeth Wilson. I represent District 73, which is mostly Marion, but a little bit of Cedar Rapids as well. I'm a freshman. I still feel like I'm learning an immense amount every single day. I thought this is just how the House of Representatives works, but apparently this is an unusual year. So yeah, lots of bills coming through. I serve on economic growth and technology, government oversight, which you may be hearing about in the news lately with book banning. Local government, transportation, ways and means, and then I sit on the Health and Human Services Appropriations Subcommittee. And just as a note, before I forget, I sit on the subcommittee about 14-year-olds driving the 50 miles, and there are 3 of us, me and 2 Republicans, and we have not moved that forward and do not intend to add a subcommittee on the House side. So, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. I would like to make a correction because I did inadvertently forget to mention Representative Sheets of House District 78, who did let us know he had an out-of-town conflict today, so I apologize. I just wanted to add that to the record. So our first question, which we will start with Senator Taylor, is around education, but also government structure. So with the changes at the Department of Education, will the new director be subject to approval by the Senate or appointed by the governor? What are the thoughts and what are we hearing?
Well, I can say that one of the elements of the large government reorg involves changing the number from 34 to 30, so it's 3/5 of the Senate for governor appointees. That section may or may not stay in there. The question is, with the Department of Ed leader, who the current one that we've had for 3 years has just resigned, it's in the paper this morning, to pursue other opportunities, but there's a lot of changes in the Department of Ed, a lot of changes. And so I don't know the answer to that, but how the Senate picks governor appointees is likely to change, or it's possible that it'll change. And that's, I think, again, part of that, a very concerning piece. I'm going to keep repeating it. It's a 1,500-page bill in the Senate. It's like 1,300 pages in the House. The House doesn't care too much about I would understandably, about the number needed to confirm governor appointees, but she wants to control that and change that. And I think as a government structure, that's just bad for everybody. It doesn't matter who's in charge. Somehow, some way in the past, we put that up there, and it made sense. So I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm worried about it.
Yeah, where to begin? The initial page, I think Senator Taylor's right, 1,572 pages, 19 divisions. I started getting real worried around 1,100, page 1,100. I'm getting contacted. The short answer is I don't have that answer either. I'm glad he went first. I am getting contacted from a lot of constituents and just folks that are highly concerned, and that includes everybody from state employees to just people that are concerned about how the government's going to be restructured. And right now, I'm muddling through those pages as time allows and trying to answer questions for folks as best we can. As I mentioned earlier, there's so many changes from the initial reading of a bill, which again, to me, a busy bill is 20 pages. This one is so massive that we're trying to piece through it and then try to answer questions and then get back. And this bill will have so many changes before we're done with it that it's hard to know exactly how it's going to go. And then old business adage is we'd rather have it right than by Friday, but this one's so big that we're really going to have to be diligent as we go through it. So I'm hoping it's an appointee, by the way, if I can at least give you that answer. So I assume it's going to Molly?
Yeah.
Or no? Oh, we're going, okay, all right.
You're last.
I would just reiterate what the others have said. It's a large, massive bill, lots of consolidation and changes where people will be reporting. And it's also a huge power grab by the governor. We have more power to appoint individuals to boards and commissions and other things. So it's something that really needs to be looked at carefully, section by section.
I don't have too much more to add. Like they've all stated, we don't really know until that bill goes through. So just kind of an education reminder piece for those that might not know. A bill can get amended at subcommittee level, committee level, before it goes to the floor, and then it also has to go back to the other chamber where it can be amended. So lots of potential stops along the way where it can be updated. And we just don't know what that's gonna look like right now.
The only thing I'll pose is maybe another question. So this government reorganization piece of legislation, what I've heard is that there is a consultancy firm that the governor hired to help draft this legislation that apparently spent $1 million on hiring this outside firm to come in and come up with a plan to reorganize the government. When you take a look at the legislation, as you can, presume, it's massive, and it does have major first order change. And the questions I have, what efficiencies are we doing? What services are going to be cut? Secondly, where did that $1 million come from? It seems right now that we have a really hard time funding the priorities that Iowans really want in our state, and for the governor to have, a slush fund to put $1 million wherever she feels like it for something that may or may not be needed, but it certainly hasn't been decided by the legislature, to me is concerning.
All right, I appreciate the question. I did mention I'm working through this bill. My division that I have is not education. It's the Division 3, which will be the new Department of Inspections, Appeals, and Licensing. It's a pretty large division. It's well over 300 pages. And then the other division I'm going through is Division 9, which has to do with the workforce development department. So I don't know. I was trying to search it up here to pull the PDF up to see if I could get that answer, and I was unable to. But a lot of new directors are appointed by the governor. So this one at Dial is appointed by the governor, and then would be confirmed by the Senate, but is also to serve at the pleasure of the governor. So, and that just in the one division I've gone through most of right now, that happens about 3 or 4 times with different department and division heads to serve at the pleasure of the governor. So.
I think I don't really have any much more to add than what's been said, but what I've been hearing from constituents are concerns about, are the services provided still going to be adequate in those areas where they are drawing from. So that's kind of what I'm trying to keep my eye on. And again, searching through the entire bill in its entirety is it's a big job. So we're all still working through that.
So I went through the paperwork, and the Education Division, the Department of Education, the person who runs the Department of Education is still up for grabs as whether that will be confirmed by the Senate or not. However, everybody underneath them, which covers the Board of Educational Examiners, college student aid, career and technical education, and the community college bureaus, they will be determined by whoever gets the Department of Education job. They will be hired by them. And there are over 10 of these positions that will serve directly for the governor.
Okay, our next question will go to Senator McClintock to begin, and the topic is child labor. What is your position on either the benefits or challenges of the proposed new child labor laws?
We're going to get the Vice Chair of Labor on this one. Okay, so I'll tell you what I don't like about this we'll just cut to the chase. When you're reducing ages of persons that can deal with alcohol concerns me. Working in public safety and law enforcement my whole life and dealing with the effects that alcohol can have on people and in environments, in dealing with calls my whole life, in disturbances and problems and things like that where alcohol is used, consumed, and sold. It's concerning to me that we reduce ages of anyone that has access to or the sale of alcohol. So I'm concerned about anything where we lower ages for things like that. So this is one of those bills where we need to look very closely at it before it would have my support. And they're going to have to show, meaning the floor manager would have to show a lot of justification as to why that we need this. Now I understand the arguments of labor shortages and things like that, and could we look at the possibility of a program like this that could be beneficial? Okay, fine, I'm open to looking at things that, I don't want to just be a naysayer to change just for being a naysayer, but they're going to have to really show that it's something that would be beneficial and not harm somebody underage in any way.
Sorry about that. Oh wow, this child labor bill is, you have 16-year-olds that are able to sell and serve alcohol. You got 14-year-olds working in businesses where they shouldn't be working, and the businesses begin exemptions from liabilities. It's wrong, it's backward, it's a child labor bill, and it needs to be defeated.
I just feel like we're all over the place with our legislation this year. We have the child labor laws. We want to allow the children to work longer hours, later hours, at younger ages in unsafe work conditions. We've got the ones to lower the age on when they can drive, basically give them a driver's license at 14 and 15, driving that 50-mile distance to and from work. There's another one out there allowing them to drive to and from their grandparents' house. Not quite sure why that one's needed. But we want to regulate what books they can read. We're saying they're old enough, mature enough, safe enough to drive and work, and we seem to only care about their safety or the well-being of the child when they're in a public school. We did that bill last year that lowered the age for childcare, put increased ratios, so we weren't worried about their safety then, and we've got to make it make sense.
One common theme that we see with a lot of the legislation that is coming through with the majority party, they're talking about labor shortage and workforce shortage. Maybe we'll get a chance to talk today about the medical malpractice legislation that passed last week, and that came back to that as well. Well, we need to pass medical malpractice because that's going to bring doctors into the state of Iowa. I wholeheartedly argue that we need to make Iowa a state that people want to live, people want to move to, and once the children in our state, like my own 3 daughters, are old enough to make a decision where they want to live, they will want to choose Iowa. Until we can make a state that folks want to choose the state of Iowa because they've got good schools, because they've got clean water, because they've got recreational experiences, because they're not taking away individuals' rights to make their own medical decisions, because we've got a strong mental health system. That's what will bring workers to the state of Iowa. Those are the things we need to invest in. We don't need to expand the age in which kids can go to work, or let a 14-year-old work until 11 o'clock, or not provide workers' compensation if they get injured. There's a lot of really simple things I think that if we look at, we can tackle here in the state of Iowa, and that's what we should be doing.
Okay, in the House, this bill didn't go to the Labor Committee, where I said it decided to go to Commerce. And the chair of Commerce owns a bar and restaurant, so you can make that connection. I did read through this bill expecting it to come to Labor, and just my minute take on it. It would allow children as young as 14 to work in mines, packing houses, construction, manufacturing, all the things that we do across the state that are logging, just the top 10 most dangerous professions that adults do. As long as children were enrolled in a work-study program with their school, they can do it. That work-study program then does exempt those employers from liability on those children if they were to get hurt or die seriously injured on those places of employment. We talked about the alcohol. It's always nice when Iowa gets national attention, and the Daily Show did pick this up earlier this week, so you're welcome to take a look at that. I don't know if the idea of solving the child care issue is by employing children at this point, so I don't understand the thought behind that. And this bill was put together by a group of industry executives and lobbyists to fulfill their wish list of garbage to more cheap labor. Exactly, thank you.
Wow, I'm following that. I will say, in addition, that in the House, it's House Study Bill 86 that Tracy was referring to, and the grandparent thing was in that bill is the one that I sat on that subcommittee, and it was actually quite a wonderful thing that this grandparent came forth, that bill came out of, because he lives not in the route from that his granddaughter's school and the mom's house. And so it was really, if he could add the grandparent thing, then that allowed her to get home more safely to his house than having to traverse back to her mother's house. And so what we talked about in the subcommittee was maybe there's a better way to solve that problem than this particular bill with this 50-mile thing. And instead maybe we can add an additional address to 14-year-olds. But what came out of that conversation is we've got a graduated driver's license program in Iowa, and we really need to tackle that as a whole and not try to piecemeal it together. That actually comment came from an insurance lobbyist, and I thought it made the most sense. So like I said, that bill is not moving out of the House right now at the subcommittee level. And I think also I wanted to mention that I serve on that Health and Human Services Appropriations Committee, and we discussed a little bit, again, as Representative Ellert described, the younger kids being able to watch children in the childcare environments, and we were presented with what the results of that have been, how many childcare providers have utilized that, and that was like 50% or something. But what I asked was, how do the parents feel about it? So I'm sure that the providers, maybe some have implemented, some have not, but do we have any data on how the parents feel that has worked? And the answer was no.
All right, this is an area that I have been working on a lot over the last 6 weeks. So Senate File 167 is what it is over in the Senate. This would allow the 14 and 15-year-olds to work, and it would also expand the working conditions for the 16 and 17-year-olds who are already able to work. So it's expanding a lot more than just letting 14 and 15-year-olds join the workforce. They're also upping the ante for the ones that are already there. This also limits, as they said, the liability for harm resulting from any of the work that these children do. Still not loud enough. Sorry, I have a quiet voice. This basically takes all the liability away from the employers, and it takes and puts it back on the schools, because we have lots of money in the schools to pay for something if the kid does something wrong at their job, right? So I'm going to take this all the way back to even education. First of all, we do not have workforce or classes for 14 and 15-year-olds. We do have some things available to 17 and 18-year-olds to go to Kirkwood to get some skills training, whether it be in the trades or some other areas. And they drive themselves because they have a driver's license. The schools are not responsible once they're at Kirkwood, they're a Kirkwood student. And that would also mean a teacher would have to be supervising these kids at these jobs. And as a teacher, I'm not going out to the bars at 11 o'clock at night to check on whether or not a 14-year-old is safe. And they shouldn't be there. They aren't safe. I have worked at a bar. I don't know how many of you have, but it is not okay for a 14-year-old girl to be hanging out at a bar. It just isn't okay. It's not okay for a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old, quite frankly. They should be adults.
Here's some numbers for you. 2021, 3,000 child labor violations in the whole country. Now that might be lack of action enforcement, but that's also a large number. In Iowa, we have businesses and corporations that really aren't waiting for the laws to change. They are exploiting minors right now. Okay, on the other hand, this is sweeping change to 23 different elements of laws that we have relative to child labor. If it's something innocuous as a bagger at Hy-Vee working past 10 p.m., it could be a $10,000 fine. That just boils the blood of the corporations that want these changes. That can't be right. This is too much. But you change this piece of the law, and what you're going to do is you're going to allow a minor to work in a light production facility after high school on the second shift and drive 50 miles or whatever to do that. So that's a problem. And there's some other elements in here. I just glanced at the bill. I will say that this goes against common sense, and it totally twists Tom Vilsack's mantra of we need more Iowans, younger Iowans, and better paid Iowans. He didn't mean those all to equate to we need younger, better paid Iowans by working in the lumber mill with the saw. And we over the years we used to fight him on. They wanted because it was the kid of the owner who worked at a car wash, but the chemicals in the car wash barrels are very, very dangerous and deadly, and you have to have OSHA inspecting and training, etc. So, again, these are dangerous.
All right, thank you, everyone. The next question begins with Representative Stave. The topic is the judiciary. And the question, it's a two-parter. What is your opinion and what do you think are the chances for the passage of a bill to reinstate the death penalty in Iowa?
Well, I'm opposed to reinstating the death penalty. I haven't heard what's happening with that particular bill. They do this almost every year, and it has failed to pass the House, and I'm hoping that's true again this year. I don't know much more about it. I have not seen this year's version.
My comments are the same. I haven't seen this year's version. Definitely don't support it. If anybody up here has more information, I will gladly yield my time so you can explain further.
I also have not seen any legislation, but it is something that comes through fairly regularly, and I do not support the death penalty.
You're going to hear an echo here about not seeing anything and not supporting it, and we'll see what our pro-life majority party and how flexible they'll be on that. Will remain to be seen.
I've been wanting to say this all day. Ditto.
So I also am against this, and just Senator McClintock and I both put in a bill that does have to do with penalties for those who are in prison, but it's to make sure that those who have violent crimes, have committed violent crimes, don't get through the loophole, lets them out early. That I do agree with, but I do not agree with the death penalty.
The last death penalty execution in Iowa was 1965. We outlawed it after that. I think it was Governor Hughes. It's been brought up a few times. The last time it was debated on the floor, meetings it passed through committee, was 1994. I was elected in 1995, so it's never been debated in my 28 years. Senator Brad Zahn has introduced legislation from time to time. The one that made it through subcommittee this week was one where if you rape or kill a child and then you kill to hide that crime. So we're going to talk about a lot of, heinous crimes, and in doing that, when we don't know for sure if the, people in charge are really going to pass this thing, we are definitely going to rip the scab off the wounds that have lightly healed over a lot of victims over these years for no good reason. That is one of the elements I think that came out in the subcommittee. Why are we doing this, right? And Senator Zahn, just says, well, I'm just going to introduce that bill. He's not really thinking it through unless he has the votes, and I think every year talked about, but it's kind of moving further this year, so it's hard to predict even after all those years. And here's another thing that I have to say, and I had to help my son understand this. He just thought that, like everybody thinks, that if you go to prison for murder, it's life, but you might get out in 20 years. Well, in Iowa, life means life. If you're sentenced to life in prison, you will die in prison in Iowa. And that's not true in other states, so that's confusing to the general public.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
I sympathize with folks that want the death penalty for heinous crimes, especially against children and things of that nature, or horribly heinous crimes. But I am a no on the death penalty.
All right, our next question will begin with Representative Eller, and the topic is eminent domain. What is your position on eminent domain for private carbon capture?
This one I'll definitely yield my time. I know there's a couple more people here that are more well-versed on this. I do not support eminent domain, though, when it's just taken for profit and it belongs to someone. I will yield. You are pretty well-versed on this topic, aren't you, with Representative State? Yeah, I'll yield my time when it's Representative State's turn. He's a lot more articulate on this issue.
So I do think, and we've had various pieces of legislation over the last 3 years that talks about private property rights and what an individual should or shouldn't be able to do with their property rights. I think a private property owner should be able to determine what they want to do with their own property. I do think that there's times that eminent domain, because it serves the best public interest, or it will ensure that the public, there's benefit to the public. It certainly has to weigh into that. I would have to be significantly more convinced at this point to support any eminent domain for carbon capture. So at this point, I would be a no vote.
All right, probably before last week, there wasn't any legislation that was introduced specifically talking about carbon pipelines and eminent domain. I think something came either Thursday afternoon and the House is read in, or Friday morning. I haven't got to it yet. I've only seen the headlines. So for me, you know, private property rights are very important. You know, what we do on our own land is really up to us and, you know, and our neighbors if they own it. So if they want to enter into a deal to do something, it's hard for me to tell them that they can't do that voluntarily. We talked about it last month about how eminent domain for public good is something that a lot of us in the larger towns and cities in Iowa are used to because it's for public good. So it's an issue that I'm monitoring closely because it's something that's going to affect a lot of us in this state and across the city in the southwest side where I live, and so I'll be watching.
I think, yeah, I feel like this is something I'm learning about through this process and continuing to learn. The most I've heard from constituents is no. I've heard a few yeses, but I feel like I've got a lot of research still to do. But again, I think eminent domain for a private company when it doesn't serve a public good doesn't make sense to me. So for what I know right now, I would be a no. But I did see Representative Holt on TV recently, and I think he and I may not agree on much, especially when it comes to education and LGBTQ issues, but I did hear him say that he does not support eminent domain for a private company because he does not believe this is for public good. So I'm glad to actually have an agreement with him on one issue.
This is an easy question. I am not for eminent domain. No, I am not for eminent domain. I do know that Senator Jeff Taylor has some bills out there, and I can't tell you the numbers offhand, that are welcomed by landowners. I do not agree with taking people's private property for profit. We know eminent domain is there for public interest, as giving you a graduation. Representative Jardy said, this is not that. So we need to make sure that our landowners are able to control their land. It is theirs.
Inside the government reorg bill also is changes to the utilities board, such as for specifically the consumer advocate. And this should bother everybody that they're trying to do this, to take the independence of that agency out of being independent. So questions on eminent domain and the authority and the rules and the interpretation of all of that relative to eminent domain is often, brought forward by consumer advocates or, and then adjudicated in the utilities board. The governor with this giant bill is going to also take away the authority to review those things and make them beholden to a political appointee, change term limits and set salaries, which right now is already set in law to keep independence. Okay, so I do not support eminent domain. And interestingly about eminent domain is that is a concept, property rights concept, that is not owned by the conservative majority. Everybody wants that. Everybody understands that. However, if there's a landowner that wants to personally engage in and sell their rights to their land, they should have the right to do that. And then for the pipe fitters who might be building these pipes, they can put welds in there and go around certain spots. They don't have to go straight lines. So we should not employ eminent domain except for public good, such as highways, libraries, this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you just hit on a really good point there, that folks that want to participate and through easements or sale of their property certainly have a right to do so. I saw this with solar. I fought the industrial solar farms on behalf of folks up in rural Lynn County for the 2 years I was in the House. But people that want to participate with their land certainly can do so. If you're following the carbon capture portion, you'll see that they're making progress, right? Some counties are 100% already, and I think over half now. If you take the 50% standard and work up, it's getting leverage. And they'll finally hit a percentage that they need to make a compelling argument to use eminent domain. I don't like eminent domain. I don't want to see it used. If you've tracked what I've done over the last 3 years in the House and the Senate, you'll see I'm not in favor of it at all. If you want to look at my website or my Facebook page last week, you'll see that I posted those articles that the other Senator Taylor is talking about. So not a fan of it at all, against its usage except in governmental portions that we need for a public good. But the more people that participate and voluntarily get involved with this, unfortunately for money, it is how these projects move forward.
Let's go, sir.
Representative Steen gets 1 more minute. He gets 1 minute.
Good job, Art.
I just want to say eminent domain is not the only issue of concern with the CO2 pipeline. It's a hazardous material. It will be going through our communities, and even to understand one of the lines would go through the Prairie School District area near school buildings. So there's rules and setbacks and insurance and hazardous groups like the fire department stuff that need to be trained. There's a huge amount of what's going into this. There's big money behind it, billions of dollars of tax credits. So that's where it's coming from. The science itself is questionable still on whether or not this will work well. Here we are. And the eminent domain is the issue of individual rights. And I believe that eminent domain should only be used for a public purpose, a compelling public purpose that can only be achieved in that way, and not for private gain, which this is completely private gain. And so I'm opposed.
Excellent, thank you. Our next topic is censorship, and we'll begin with Representative Jurdy. What do you expect the next steps to be on legislation that is limiting access to books?
Well, that's an interesting question, and frankly, who knows? It's been all over the board this year. I did sit on education last year. I do not sit on education right now. Likely, anything that comes through as far as censorship is going to go through education. Some has gone through education. I don't know where that goes. And so I think I'm going to leave it for folks that are on education to comment on where the legislation is, what they see, and where they see that going, because we hear things all the time. Well, this is coming through this committee, or this might be coming through this committee, or I hear this is in the Senate. Until I actually see it, it's really hard to believe. And even when I see it, sometimes it's really hard to believe. So I will save that for folks on the Education Committee to comment.
Yeah, what are their next steps? I have no idea, right? Who knows what they're going to do next, especially with this. So I will yield my time to someone much more involved. Absolutely. Representative Wilson would like that. So.
Thank you. I sit on government oversight, so though I haven't seen a bill yet, it seems very, very apparent that what the governor wants to do is if a book is censored in one district, it will be banned across the state. So it will completely take out local control of the school districts. So I don't know, you may or may not be aware, on government oversight, first meeting just set the rules, but our second meeting was five parents, so 5 mothers, who had issue with books that were being in the library as well as through curriculum. Those parents were allowed to come to this meeting a couple weeks ago on a Monday at the Capitol. They were each given 10 minutes time. I'm unfamiliar with what other committee meetings we have that people are allowed to speak for 10 minutes at a time, but they were each given 10 minutes. We, as committee members, were not allowed to speak until the end, and then we were each given 5 minutes to question, to make comments. There are processes in the school districts, everyone that I looked at. These school districts that were representative were West Des Moines, Carlisle, Carroll. I'm sorry if I'm forgetting the other ones. Oh, I have his extra minute though. Are you counting that? I'm talking fast, but I gotta go faster. Yeah. So what they did was they followed the process sometimes, but they hadn't completely followed the process all the time. And what happens is if you don't like a book that the teacher has assigned, you can ask the teacher to assign a different book. That's part of the policy, that's not a problem. If then there's a book in the library that you think should not be in the library, you can opt out of having your child have access to that book or that kinds of selection of books. That's an opt-out process. It's in every one of those school districts in the policy. If then you decide it shouldn't be in the library, there is it called recharacterization process? Something like that. So there's a process that, and again, in a school board policy that you follow, and it goes through the superintendent who appoints a committee, and there are so many people from the community, there are a couple of kids on it, there are parents. So there's a committee that looks at the book, looks at the reviews of the books, and then goes through the process of deciding, should this book be here? And that had sometimes been followed in this situation, and what they didn't like was the outcome. And it actually went to the Department of Ed in one case, I think in West Des Moines or Johnston, and it was upheld. So there's another committee meeting on Monday at 5 o'clock. The committee chair has decided that parents who don't want these books to be banned are not going to be allowed to speak. Who can speak is will somebody else yield time to me? No, okay. Anyway, I'm good. Oh, Art's gonna give me more time. Okay, so what's gonna happen is, the administrative personnel from those school districts, curriculum directors, those people are gonna be allowed to speak. So that's at 5 o'clock, that will be publicized. 4 o'clock, we're gonna hold a meeting with the parents and open that up to the news and allow them to speak. So we are trying to get their side as well, so we have a more balanced opinion about what's going on. And what we really are mostly concerned about is the process and the local control. And the fact that if you don't want your kid to read a book, you have every right to decide that. That is your parental prerogative. And that's why we have these kinds of processes in place. But you don't get to decide for my kid. And one parent in particular that I was asking questions of, she didn't like the book. She had not followed the process. She had not opted her kid out, but she was making this choice because she said we have uninvolved parents and this isn't right and those kids shouldn't have access. And I said, did you speak with those parents? And she hadn't. So her heart's in the right place, but she was she was making a choice for those parents that she doesn't have the right to make. So that's all I have to say.
Covered a lot down there, Representative, so I don't have to cover too much. As somebody who is also on the Education Committee over on the Senate side, we have not had this come through yet, but we know it's coming, and we've heard plenty from the community. My biggest concern here is they did hold that one meeting already, and they allowed those 10 minutes for those people who were against the books, and they already didn't allow people who were against the banning of books come in. So this will be the second meeting that they are not allowing people to come in that have an oppositional view to what this bill stands for. So again, if you are interested in this, please come to the Capitol at 4 o'clock on Monday, because we need to rally and make sure they understand that Moms for Liberty do not speak for all parents in our community. Again, they have every right to parent their child. And they're really good at freedom words and liberty words and don't infringe on my right words, but they're okay to take other people's freedoms away. They're okay to take other people's liberties away, and they're okay to infringe other people's rights. So that is where my biggest concern lies. No one who has ever banned a book in history has ever come out in a good light. And so that is something that I'm looking at as an educator. We want things to be appropriate, school age appropriate for children, but we do not want to prevent people from freedom of speech, freedom of reading a book.
Excellent point, Senator. I appreciate that. when Florida's Governor DeSantis said, you know, passed the Don't Say Gay bill, that was kind of an example of how things have gotten in certain sectors of the country, and that has also led to the cultural war and banning books. But as Representative Wilson said, parents who need to be involved already have processes and policies in place to protect any specific parent against something like a book content. And of course, most of these contents, the content that we're talking about is racial or sexual identity and these kinds of things. And so it really has no place in, with policies already in place, there's no place for this kind of a law. And we've also seen that this is happening in other states. That's a theme that we're finding in so much of what the governor is doing now. Problem somewhere else, let's bring the solution to Iowa. It's not really a problem here, so why should we solve it here, right? So that's just kind of my overarching theme there. And you know, looking at the New York Times this last summer, they did a story on these bills are growing in other states. And you know, it's just not a problem here, but my gosh, we've got to have this legislation.
Okay, so age-appropriate content, location. And I think that as legislators, because inevitably when local level doesn't agree or something, a lot of topics get pushed up to the state level. So I think that we're gonna have to muddle through and then as a group decide on how we're gonna deal with those three levels as we look at legislation. If it's porn, if it's filth, all right, obviously that's content, it's gotta go, it can't be there. If it's age appropriate, I agree with Senator Donahue, then fine. What books are age appropriate to be able to be there or what it is? And then the location, this is a public school, does it belong there? The banning of books, okay, no, I don't think people want to ban books or whatever. But even if they say it can't be there, then they still have their phones, right? I hear that all the time. Well, they can look this up on their phone. Well, it's really not being banned, right? They can go home and the parent can hand it to them. It's not banning it. So I think we have to kind of work through those three areas and determine what the balance is. And that's what we have to do as legislators. So I don't think anybody wants to make porn available to, you know, kindergartners, third graders, and things like that. We just have to use some common sense here. Thank you.
My time is short.
20 seconds. Sorry, Art.
Well, I just want to say I'm opposed to this new legislation in order to ban books. I did sit in on the subcommittee meeting and listen to the Moms for Liberty, and it appeared to me that most of the stuff was handpicked. They went through every library they could find, every book they could find to find the picture that was most offensive. And they were well orchestrated in doing that and presenting that to this oversight committee. But we already have processes and procedures in our libraries and our schools for doing this, where parents have input, and parents also can ask their child not to participate or opt out in all of our curriculum. So it's not really an issue. It's being brought here as part of a national movement against diversity, I believe, and equity and inclusion. That would include anything that has to do with anything that is different than your own beliefs. And I think that's absolutely wrong.
Not too much for me to add. Definitely do not support this. There's already a process. Each family can decide for their own. I had a lot of issue with I sat in on that meeting that Representative Wilson was referencing, and she talked to the one mom that said, well, a lot of parents work multiple shifts and they don't have the time to be involved in their child's education. And I disagree with that, because I was a single mom working multiple jobs and going to school, and I took a lot of offense to that because I was very well involved. Maybe I couldn't go volunteer all the time, but those were the things that I could do, was read the emails from the teachers, you know, go to conferences and stuff. So I highly disagree with that argument that they're using. Senator McClintock brought up the cell phones. On Thursday afternoon, I received a press release from Dads for Decency, who wants to join Moms for Liberty, and they want smartphones to be banned from school everywhere at school from the time the child gets on the bus to the time they enter. So basically the students couldn't take the phones with them. So this is an overreach as well. As we know, especially with school shootings and such, that's kind of the first offense is a cell phone, kids that walk home, and so on. So just to put that on the radar as well.
Okay, thank you. Our next, we'll start with Representative Cooling for the next question. The topic is taxes, and this is a very interesting question. It's a process. The audience wants to know really how you, with the proposed changes to the property tax laws, they have impacts at the county, the city, and the school level. So how do you, as legislators, really talk to people, weigh the pros and cons, and so they want to know a little bit about how you research some of these topics, but also, what is your opinion? So it's kind of a two-parter, and figure how you want to weigh in the 90 seconds there.
Yeah, there's a lot of parts to that one. As was mentioned earlier, nobody loves paying taxes, right? Everyone wants to, but we all recognize that we want to live in a society that has things and services like roads and first responders and fire trucks and libraries and schools and things like that. So we recognize that those are public goods that we want as a society. So that's how I weigh things. We had a vote this week. I'm sure that my other colleagues in the House will talk about that we did on Wednesday. That talked about the governor not being able to count to 10 and how that affected our state and county governments, and the fact that it shorted those folks throughout the state $127 million. And we as Democrats proposed an amendment to that would allow the taxpayer trust fund to cover that loss for the first year while those folks figure it out, and they're not the public safety offices and police officers and fire truck purchases won't be put on hold for a year while state or local and county governments figure out how to cover that misstep in government. So those are the things that come up and that I think about when we're talking about taxes. So.
Yeah, that was a tough one. I sit on Ways and Means, and Representative Jacoby from Coralville was the one that kind of brought that forward, the amendment, because the state, specifically the cities are, and the counties are in the process of certifying their budgets, and they were already through part of that process. So a bill that was passed back in 2013 to do rollbacks for thank you, yeah, the multi-unit residential to the residential rate, as that was calculated at the Department of Revenue, they forgot to add in that 10th year. So the cities understood what their budgets were going to be, the counties just understood what their budgets were going to be, and then the state knew that that was going to be different, but didn't give them enough warning, so they were already certifying their budgets when this information came to light. So what Representative Jacoby recommended and put forth an amendment so that we could use taxpayer funds that are in excess of $1.2 billion, that we would use $127,000 of that and backfill so that the cities wouldn't have to make any cuts. And that was rejected at the committee level, and then it was rejected on the floor. So I think that's really unfortunate because it puts our cities and our counties in a really tough spot.
So again, I know you've heard from everybody, nobody wants to pay taxes, but we want those amenities, we want those services. So the problem, as Representative Wilson just said, is that they did not fix their error. This was the governor's error, her revenue services error, and they knew back in October that this was an error, and they waited until end of January to let the cities and our college communities and our schools know that they might have to redo some things. They had months and months and months to give them that warning, and they didn't. But we do have what they call a surplus of $2 billion at the Capitol with the governor. And now, I'm not sure we should call it a surplus. What it really is a bunch of things didn't get funded. Bank account, okay? But it is there. And we could have backfilled this mistake by the governor with one-time funds, as Representative Wilson said, we also did this over in the Senate, from that surplus amount, so that no one would have been hurt this year. And they basically said that the cities needed to live, in fact they didn't basically, they told me point blank, the cities needed to learn to live in their budget. Well, they had. They'd set their budget according to what the governor had told them they would have. So it was pretty disingenuous for him to say that, because we know that our cities do a good job in making sure that they are paying for the services that we all need, and it's unfortunate.
We need and people want local control. And so much so that we put it in our Constitution, 1968. However, the paragraph says basically, my words, you get to have local control except for when the state government says you don't, right? So we've talked about services, nobody wants to pay taxes. Here's a thing for you. There's a bill this week that talks about taking above ground storage tanks and making them not classified as real estate. So what that'll do is that will make them, it'll change the property tax bill. And then I won't name names, but I was privy to a conversation amongst, I will say, literally experts on property tax, not legislators, but experts on it. And they said that I better read this, do legislators realize that each time they remove items from the tax roll, such as above ground storage tanks, that they are actually raising taxes on all other property? Certainly some legislators do understand that. But what it is it's just a little bill. It's just a little bill. We want to try to do this to help commerce or something. But what you do is you're taking away the taxes, and so you vote on it and you change it, and it's just a little change. But just so you know, tanks are assessed as real estate in every other state in the country. So there's a process that we have in place, and we've built it over many, many years. So to make some of those changes, you cannot look at them in a vacuum. I like the balloon metaphor. You fill the balloon with taxes, and then you push here, take one out, and it expands over there. So you gotta look at it in wholesale. You gotta look at it wholesale. I'm out of time.
I'll be brief. When you say who we talk to or what we hear from or whatever, I'll just paraphrase here from I'm going to paraphrase here from the common email that I do receive or hear from people. And it says, instead of your going on about your support of incremental tax change to the property tax, which is good, why don't you make it, or why don't you work on abolishing residential taxes in Iowa, which would be great. I'd much rather pay 12% or more in sales tax than to constantly pay taxes to the state. So I do hear that, where folks want to pay more in sales tax than have their property taxes. They'd rather see property taxes abolished, pay sales tax, and have that across the board. It is a conversation that's out there. I'll make you aware of it. So that is one of the things that is being talked about at the state level. So will that happen? I don't know, but just know that that's a conversation out there that is taking place, and one of the possibilities that an increase in sales tax for a reduction in other taxes. Thank you.
No, I'm trying to give it to you. Sorry.
Well, the tax issues, and I understand that they want to put cap on property taxes. All of us would appreciate that in some sense. But we just have a flat tax that's going into its second year, or it'll be its first year coming up. And that's going to cut the budget by $600 million. You have to think about that, $600 million less in revenue each year from the taxes that were passed already, that cut. And then there's another, in 3 years, it will be about $315 to $350 million hit on the budget for vouchers to pay private school tuition. And that will be somewhere around $350 million each year. So now we're looking at $950 million, close to $1 billion less in funds that we have today for government. And the governor is also talking, she said she was going to end the income tax, get that passed in the next year. So I don't know how you fund services to the vulnerable people, how you take care of services at any level. So we're really headed to problems. I can't fathom how this is going to happen.
I really don't know what to add on this one. There's been a lot of different comments. I guess just going back to the bill that we voted on this week, it was a tough choice. You know, you either help your city or you help reduce the property tax. And if you help the city, you know, we offered a great amendment that would have covered the loss to community colleges, which I don't think people thought about. The House Democrats offered the amendment that also would have helped with the loss to public safety. There's a lot of things in there that I don't think the everyday public realizes, you know, we're going to be cut. So unfortunately, that amendment did not go through, and the bill went through as is.
So I, as I had mentioned, sit on Ways and Means and get to deal with all the tax policy and legislation that goes through the Iowa House. The piece of legislation that everybody's been talking about, I believe it was Senate File 181, about the $127 million deficit to local municipalities, a $4 million deficit to our community college system as a result of the Department of Revenue messing up. I will tell you that I voted no on Senate File 181, and just as a little spoiler alert for everybody here, what that means is that come a year from this August, that there's going to be a bunch of mail with grainy pictures of me on it saying that Eric Jardy voted to raise your property taxes. No, what I did, I voted to ensure that our cities and our counties and our municipalities can do what they have said they need to do for their citizens that live there. I will not do it at the backs of the cities and the counties. I'm glad that Representative Taylor mentioned the above ground storage tanks. I also voted no on that because that is a corporate, did I call you the wrong name?
Sorry. No, I didn't mean that.
Now he took my time. And then so that is a corporate giveaway. We're talking about the Magellan fuel tanks that are millions of dollars that will not be taxed. That is increasing property taxes. So you can't have it both ways. I vote to save taxpayer dollars. If we can continue to provide the services we need and lower taxes, I'm all for it. Senator McClintock mentioned that there's conversation about raising the sales tax. We know that that's regressive. I think 12%, you can't do it at 12%. It would have to be significantly higher than 12%. And who's benefiting from that? Only those who can afford to pay for the goods.
Okay, thank you. The way our questions have fallen, we don't have time for more questions and getting in our closing statements. And I do want to respect our legislators' time. I know there's another forum today, so you're very busy people on Saturdays. So before we jump into closing statements, and we'll begin with Representative Wilson for those, I just wanted to share with you quickly some of the topics, some of the questions that came in, their topics, because I think it's important to inform our representatives some of the other areas that constituents and audience members care about. So there were questions about quality child care, foster care, budget priorities, effective lobbying, water quality, and gun laws. So these are some of the other issues that people in the room today care about, and we hope the last 10 or 15 minutes when we close at 11:30, if we haven't addressed your question and some of the legislators can stay around, please feel free to ask questions of our representatives. So thank you again everyone for participating. I also want to thank the Marion Public Library and Pro Video for offering their space and for recording this so that our virtual attendees and others who couldn't be here today can learn about the issues and the topics that are important in our community. A reminder that the League of Women Voters does offer and welcome membership to all, and you can learn more by visiting our website, lwvlynncounty.org, or by speaking with any members here today. We're happy to welcome you to our organization. So with that, I will turn it over to Representative Wilson for closing statements. We have 90 seconds.
Thank you again for coming, and thank you to the League for hosting. It's amazing to be at the Capitol, I have to say. It's an honor. I had some expectations, some have been met, some have not been met, but it's wonderful to be surrounded by people that are so passionate about serving the constituents and doing the right things for Iowans. And that, I tell you what, every day I'm excited to go there, and I didn't know that I would get this excited about it. So, and I will say though that the thing I'm most disappointed about is the attack on public schools. And that's how I feel like it's been. It's just a big attack on public schools, and I'm just dumbfounded by it. I don't understand it. So specifically when it comes to the book issue, if you have strong feelings about it, and you would send me emails about your support, or if you feel the other way, that's okay too. Send them to me. I'd like to be able to take that to the government oversight and represent how we feel about it as a community. With that, thank you.
Thank you very much for everybody being here today, and to the Marion, beautiful Marion Library. If you haven't been here before, go check it out. It is a great new amenity here in town, and paid for by all of us. So check it out. I started my opening comment. I talked about what I wish we were working on, and that list grows all the time. And it is things that we should be working on, things that I went to Des Moines to do. And it is an honor to serve everybody, and I will continue to fight for those things that my constituents ask me to fight for. I do vote with my people, not with corporations or the big donors. We need to be working on the child care deserts in this state, and there are a lot of them. We have to work on our public school funding. If we don't have great public schools, we will not have great businesses that pay good money, that bring good people to our state. These are things that are imperative for our state to be successful. That workforce issue comes up nonstop, but we keep doing things, it seems, at the Capitol that attack workers. We need to make our state welcoming to people. We need to make sure those essential workers, educators, nursing, we need those people here, and we need to make sure that they're being paid. We need to make sure we have mental health care and health care available to people, accessible. We need clean water. We can't live without clean water, folks, and it's something that never comes up at the Capitol. We need affordable housing, and we need good wages. These are things Iowans need, and these are the things I will continue to work for.
I think that I appreciate everybody being here in the league, and I appreciate the details that we can get into specific bills. But let me give you, again, my perspective from the 50,000-foot level. So Governor Terry Branstad and I don't agree on much, but he was the longest-serving governor in the history of the country. And one thing that I do appreciate about him is he did generally govern inside the rules. Those rules are changing now. And for whatever reason, the National Democrats in Iowa, we're not first in the nation, first time in 50 years. The Republicans still will be. They have a Democrat incumbent president, probably is going to run for re-election, but the mojo and the energy and the press and all the attention is going to come to Iowa. That has led the current governor to decide that, hey, I want a national profile. She sends troopers to the southern border in Texas. She writes legislation for us to consider that's from Florida, et cetera, et cetera. You've heard the rest. And so she's addressing problems, which we want our government to do, but they're problems from other states. So she's looking for a national profile, and she's going to get it, and she's getting it. And these are solving problems that aren't really part of our world right here, right now. They're the big picture, sure, we all care about kids and censorship, but these are not problems that we need to have these laws change. And suddenly, I gotta say it again, she's gonna change the makeup of how our state government works. And it would take many, many years to undo some of these things. So that's a concern I have. But I appreciate you being here, and look forward to next month at the other place. Excuse me.
Yes, thank you for the event and for inviting me. And I know everybody says thank you for being here, but let me just expand on that a second. When we have the opportunity to speak with you at the events, and you take the time to show up and be here and have such a good showing, and before and after the events, it makes all the difference in the world, at least to me. I'm sure it does to the others as well. Because we get such valuable input on what's going on. When I mentioned earlier when we started that there's no way we can track every single bill and everything that's going on, but we find out what's so important to everybody that shows up. And then we get such a good perspective of everything that's going on for the folks. And it's not just you, right? Because you talk to your family, and you talk to your friends, and you talk to the people in the community. So literally, when you're here and we talk to the 50 or 100 people that are in or around the room, we're actually talking to 300-400 people that you interact with, or even 1,000. So it makes such a huge difference for us to be at these forums and be able to collect the information. And I'm not just saying that to be syrupy. It really, really makes a difference for us to be here and to be able to talk to and interact with you. So thank you very, very much for being here and allowing us to be here and for having these forums. It makes a huge difference. Thank you.
No, sir. I'm going to give that mic to you every time.
I just can't leave without saying how appreciative we are of the League of Women Voters for hosting this. And for all of you that came, it's inspiring to see so many people involved in advocating for the issues that are of concern to you, as they are to us. This year has been a brutal year, I think, for education and others in the capital, particularly the least vulnerable. Many bills addressing issues that don't need to be here came from Florida or other parts of the country as part of a national agenda. I think we're going to continue to see those. So your support, your letters, your emails are very important to all of us, particularly to the legislators that are drafting some of these bills and those that sponsor them. I hope that they hear from you as well, and not just us. But we do want you to know that we really appreciate the support and the advocacy. Thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here, and those that are watching online, and the League for hosting this event. If we didn't get to your question today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can find all of our emails on the Iowa Legislative website. And then in between now and our next League of Women Voters Forum, Representative Cooling and I will be having an event to go over things that did not make it through the funnel, as our first funnel is coming up. So if you follow social media, we'll be getting those details out soon.
Again, thank you very much. I'm going to spend my last 90 seconds here talking about one more issue. Folks asked about how they can lobby. I've got an issue that, in my opinion, needs to be lobbied. It's House File 201. It's commercial trucking tort reform. What this would do, it forces a cap on the value of life of you or your loved one if you're killed or they're seriously injured by a commercial vehicle. And unless trucking companies avoid accountability if they're guilty of hiring reckless drivers or failing to safely train or support and supervise their drivers. This would mean that a truck driving company, if they hit your vehicle or they hit a bus full of folks, it would cap it at $1 million. They want to limit any damages to $1 million. A bus full of 50 people, each family would be allowed $20,000. That's it, that's a cap. An outside of state trucking company, let's say out of New York, came into the state of Iowa driving through the interstate, had an accident, they were reckless, they were liable. They may not have a cap in the state of New York, but because they're in the state of Iowa, and if this passed, they would only be held accountable to $1 million, even though their home state and their insurance company would cover them. This is, again, any tort reform that we have is a handout directly to insurance companies. That's it. It does nothing to improve our state, so please take a look at that and voice your opinions.
Thank you, Representative Jurdy, for that. That is important. In closing here, you know, we didn't get to talk about all the stuff that we could be doing to improve our state, and, you know, not talk about the divisive political issues, and really talk about things that help people and help working people, and that's what it is. We talked about the attack on public education. It's an attack on working people. It's by and large that the target is on their back. We could talk about lowering costs for Iowans and all sorts of places and things, and raising wages, and, you know, it's been a long time since we even raised the floor in the state for a lot of folks. And the fact that a lot of people can't cover that $400 emergency expenditure if it were to come up. Protecting reproductive freedom, that's coming. I'm sure funding our public schools, we've seen it hasn't gone well. That's something that we could do that would improve our state and make it more attractive to folks coming in. Obviously, we, with the goal of growing our state. And then again, legalizing marijuana and making sure that that's an issue that a majority of Iowans are for, so we can regulate it, so it's a safe product. The stuff that's out there now has the possibility of being laced with very high concentration drugs and puts a lot of our community at risk and makes our community spend a lot of money in saving those folks that shouldn't have to do that. So that's something else that we could be doing that we're not. So if you want to get involved, lobbying, that's what it's called. You're getting involved, contacting your representatives and senators by phone or email.
Okay, well, thank you again to our audience, both in person and online, for being here today. And we want to remind everyone that our third legislative forum will be at the Kirkwood Educational Center on Boyson Road on the third Saturday in March, which is March 18th. Okay, all right, so thank you again, and thank you, legislators. We appreciate it.
Yes.
I'll let you